A tutorial on graphing trig functions. I'm going to try to make it as thorough as possible, but without taking too long. Okay, to graph trig functions, you're going to basically divide the groups into two main groups. One's going to be on graphing sine x, cosine of x, and their respective reciprocals like cosecant x and secant x. So on this side, if you can graph a sine x graph, you'll know how to graph a cosecant x. Or to graph a cosecant x, you have to actually graph a sine x first, and all you have to do is just flip the graph. And for this side, you'll have to separate that from the tangent x graphs and cotangent x graphs. Those are graphed separately. Now, to do this, you should automatically, well, you should have memorized the general, picture of a sine and cosine graph. Sine graphs look like this: origin top, origin down, origin, or you can have whatever way you want to memorize that. I learned it as origin will be like the middle part right here, the transaxle, origin top, origin down, origin. And for cosecant, or I'm sorry, not secant, cosine graph, you'll start at you'll start here at 1, and you'll go top, um, or up, top, origin, down, origin, top. So go like this. Okay. Oh, and then you have to also remember to break this up into four sections right here. Four, well, they're not drawn to scale, but one, two, oh, three. So one, two, three, four. Now for a basic graph, it'll be, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. But as you'll see, this is going to change based on the phase shift and the period. Okay. All right, for tangent graphs, you have to memorize that it's always going to be between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, like this. And it goes from right up, left down. And then for your cotangent graphs, which will be here, it's essentially the same thing, except it's shifted to the right. So instead of having your period at negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, and your period for this one, the distance will be pi, same for this one. This will start at 0 and go to pi. And let me use a different color for this one. And it goes left up, right down. Okay, so this you have to memorize these in order to graph the other shifts and compression and what do you call it, stretching of the graph. Okay, all right, so let's start with this one. um, I just picked a random one. Now with this, I'm going to first graph the cosine graph, and then I'm going to graph the secant graph. Okay, because you'll see that it's essentially the exact same thing, except there's like two more extra steps. So let's imagine your question says graph a 2 secant, with all of this. Well, you want to first graph a cosine graph, and then do what do what I'm going to explain in order to graph a secant graph. Okay, so now to do this, you have to find all the component parts of a graph. So since this is a cosine, we'll call it A cosine bx plus c plus d. A is your amplitude. That's how high the graph is going to go and how low from the transaxle or from the axis. Letter B, or the number for B, is the number attached to x. So like in this case, B would be 1/2. Okay, and A would equal 2. And we're going to use B to find our period, and we're going to put it into this equation, 2 pi over B, which will give us our period, or how long one cycle of the graph is. And then we're going to use C and B together in this way, negative C over B, and this will give us what we call our phase shift, our horizontal shift, where the graph will start either left to the right instead of starting at the origin. And then D is your vertical shift, and I'll just call it VS. Okay, so let's list down all the information here and then get started. So I'm going to erase this and say, okay, the amplitude is always the absolute value, which is 2. Period is 2 pi over b. So that would be 2 pi over 1 half, which when you reduce that or when you simplify it, this will become 4 pi. Okay, 1 half is flipped and multiplied by 2. Now, the moment you find your period, you want to take your period and immediately divide it by 4 to get what we call the count. Now, some teachers call it count. You can come up with your own name for it, but it's very, very important. So if you take the period, which is 4 pi, so 4 pi divided by 4, it's pi. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means as you break up your graphs into 4 distinct parts, as you add from one starting point to the next, you're just going to be adding this number. You'll be just counting like 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, or even whatever it takes to get to that the fourth segment. Okay, and then phase shift, and we're going to take negative c over b. In this case, c would be negative pi, so it'd be negative pi, negative pi over b, which is 1 half. And then negative negative becomes positive. The 1 half will flip and become 2. So the phase shift is 2 pi. What does that mean? You're going to start your graph at 2 pi. Okay? And then your vertical shift is negative 1. So we're going to go down 1. Now, when you do these, it's not everything works out perfectly because you have to sort of look at the information that you have and be able to scale your axis. Okay, so here we go. Um, I'm going to always graph my vertical shift first. So since we're going to shift down 1 unit, this is going to be my axis. Okay, so that the graph will do something like, like that. Okay, well, this is a cosine graph, so it'll do something like, like this, and then it just keeps on what? It just keeps on going. Okay, so we're going to put all of our numbers on this dotted line where we shifted down. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is figure out where the graph starts. The graph is going to start at 2 pi, right here. And we have to consider the fact that the period is 4 pi. So what that means is the graph is going to start at 2 pi, and 4 pi later, which ends up at 6 pi, the graph will end. So it's going to go something like, well, I'm sorry, I'm doing everything. Okay, so let me put it down here. 2 pi and 6 pi. Okay, so I'm going to put all of my number on this axis right here. Okay, so the period is 4 pi. I hope you can see that. It just means the distance from 2 pi to 4 pi later will end at 6 pi. What you do is once you have this little segment, you're going to break it into 4 quadrants. Take the middle here, okay? And so you have 5 dots, I guess. You can start from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But you have 4 segments. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, you always need 4 segments. Okay, now this is where the count comes in. The count is pi. So what that means is wherever you start, you just start adding pi. 2 pi plus pi is what? 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi, and guess what? We end at 6 pi. So this should always end up exactly where you're going to stop. Okay, once you have that, you're pretty much done. The period is 2. So we're going to go up 2. So 1, 2. So the graph height is going to hit 1. And the lowest part, 1, 2, is going to hit negative what? Negative 3. So when you graph this, you start here. It's a cosine graph, so we're always going to start at the very top. And we're going to go top, middle, down, middle, top. So top, middle, down, middle, top. So every fourth that you go, you have to put the next dot. And I don't know how to say it. So you start at the top, the next fourth you go middle, next fourth you go down, next fourth you go middle and back to top, and the graph will look something like this. Okay, and that's 1 period. Now, if your teacher wants 2 periods, well, just keep on adding the count number, right? 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi, 6 pi, and just extend this out. Make it in, try to make it the same about length, and cut this into fourths. So 6 pi, 7 pi, 8 pi, 9 pi, 10 pi, and do the same thing with your dots. This time I'm gonna do it in red. So we're gonna start at top, middle, down. Oops, wait, my bad. Okay, so top, oh, middle's right at the line. So top, middle, down, middle, and top. And there it is. Okay, now if you want to go this way, you have to start subtracting pi. So it'll become like, 1 pi, 0. So it'll be like, oh, pi, 0, negative pi, negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi. So let's see, do we have 4 parts here? So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're gonna have to stop it at a negative 2 pi. Okay, and then we can graph it again. Excuse me. And we can start here. Okay, so this is our starting point. So we're gonna start at the very top. Okay, so again, top, center, down, center, top. So that top, middle, down, middle, top. So the graph will go like this. Okay, so now we have 3 full periods for a cosine graph. Now, if your teacher wants you to graph a secant graph, what you want to do is basically do all of this, draw this in a dotted line. Okay, and I'll do that with maybe with like a highlighter, which you kind of cannot see. Okay, meaning we're just representing what this cosine graph looks like. And then you want to cut the graph vertically, um, with like the shape of a U, or like a bowl. Okay, so you want to cut it like right here. Let me use a red color, make it a little bit thick. So like here, 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 or basically when the graph touches the midline axis. Okay, and all you have to do now, you see right here, this is cut into like a nice little bowl. We're going to flip the bowl upside down, and it's going to turn into a parabola. There it is. There it is. There it is. And this one. Now over here, it kind of stops, but the graph keeps on going, like right there. So it's going to flip this way. And over here, it's going to flip what? This way. So there it is. So the graphs on the outer end, that's your secant graph. Okay, the one in the middle is your cosine graph. So yeah, cosine graphs and sine graphs and cosecant, they're all graphed exactly the same. Okay, you just have to figure out where it starts. Okay, now with regards to a tangent graph, again, as I told you, you need to know the original setup for a parent graph. A tangent graph goes from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, and you have your vertical asymptotes there. And the period is not 2 pi, it's pi, okay? And so what you do is you again split this up into 4 parts. And now some teachers call this amplitude, but amplitude is when it goes up and comes back down. But you can just utilize this one in this way. Since we know that tangent graphs basically go right up and left down like that, it's going to go through the middle, but as it travels to the right, how far up does it go? Well, in this next 3/4, well, we'll call this, if that's pi over 2, this will be pi over 4, right? Let me make this a little bit thinner. Um, okay, so it's going to go up 1 right there. And right here will be negative pi over 4. And it's going to go down 1. And that's going to help you figure out that the graph will look like this. Okay? All right, but how do you graph this one? Well, pretty easy. First thing you want to do for these is basically take this portion right here and put it between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, because what that's going to do is cause this to either shift left and shift right, or even expand and contract, depending on what's attached to x here. All right, so basically what you do is you can put negative pi over 2 on the left side, this portion right here, right in the middle, and pi over 2 on the right. And all you have to do is get rid of the pi over 2 from the middle, so that x will be all by itself, isolated in the middle. So we're going to subtract pi over 2 and give it to the ends. So on this side, it'll be negative pi over 2 minus, oh, wait, did I just use pi over 2? This is pi over 4. Okay, so minus pi over 4 and pi over 2 minus pi over 4. So that what that means is the whole thing's going to shift left pi over 4 units. So instead of starting here, it'll start pi over 4 to the left once 1 unit over, or pi over 4 units over. Okay, so where exactly will it start then? We'll just do your, common denominator. So this will become 2 pi over 4. So negative 2 pi minus pi will be negative 3 pi over 4. And this right here will become 2 pi over 4 minus pi. That will become pi over 4. Okay, so those are your new asymptotes right there. Now again, before you graph these, you always want to graph, you want to show the vertical shift. So it's going to go up 2. So instead of the graph hitting the x-axis, we're going to shift this up 2 spaces or 2 units. Let me redraw that. We'll put it right here. And so this will go 1, 2, and the axes will be here. So we're going to basically put everything on this axis. So if I say that this right here is negative pi over 4, this will be negative 3 pi over 4. This will be pi over 4, and this will be 2 pi over 4, and then 3 pi over 4. And I think I just added that wrong. This right here should be negative 2 pi over 4 and negative 3 pi over what? 4. So this is where my first vertical asymptote is going to be right here. So it'll be like that. And then the other one will be at pi over 4, which is right over what? Here. And so the middle will be, let's see, it'll be 1, 2. So this right here will be my center. Okay, so the graph is going to basically do something like what? Like that. But again, we want to make it a little bit more accurate. First of all, it's negative. So that means this graph will flip and it will go right up and left up and right down. But how much up? Well, again, some teachers call it the amplitude. The unit is 1. So on the first fourth right here, go up 1 units. So, oops. So it'll go up to 3, like that. You see it? And then on this, it'll go down 1. So it'll be like right here. Okay. All right. So here's the graph. Okay. So you might have to watch that a couple more times to kind of get all of that in your head. But basically, this is the most important part right here. This will tell you where it's shifted, okay, or where it's going to start. That's your phase shift. Now, for your cotangent graph, I think I have one right here. Oh, I know what I was going to do. I'm going to take the exact same graph, just change that to a cotangent. So this is going to be y equals negative cotangent x plus pi over 4 plus 2. Okay, so everything stays the same, but we're going to switch this to a cotangent. All right, so how do we do this? Well, again, you have to remember that the parent graph y equals cotangent of x starts at 0, ends at pi, and it goes up left, down what? Down right. And everything else is the same. Like if you go 1/4 of the way, you're going to go up this many units of a and this many units of what? Negative a, okay, which is what they call the amplitude. But again, I always get frustrated with that because it's not an actual amplitude. Anyway, so what do? Again, you take that right there and put it between 0 and pi. Why? Because the original one is at 0 to pi, right here. And so from there, we're going to either shift it right, left, or expand it out, or compress it in, all depending on what is happening here. So if you do it this way, again, it'll just automatically tell you where the end asymptotes are going to be, and you just have to figure out the fourth in the middle, and then just draw your graph. Okay, so to isolate x in the middle, we're going to subtract by negative pi over 4. Okay, so on the left side, it's at negative pi over 4. On the right, pi minus pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. So again, it shifted left. So we're going to put negative pi over 4 right over here. 0, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. I know you can reduce that to pi over 2 later. And then 3 pi over what? 4. The reason I do this is just to show you that it's really easy to count. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, right? Okay, there's your asymptotes. And where's our middle? It's right over here. And our asymptote, I mean not our asymptote, our amplitude is 1. And it's a negative. So instead of going like this, it's going to go the other way. So I'm going to erase that. And I'm going to put 1 here. Oh, sorry. You know what? It's plus 2. I totally forgot. So let me erase this. And I need to go up here now. Okay, I'm going to just regraph this. Okay, so here's my x. Here's 1, here's 2. And we're going to put our axis right there. This is negative pi over 4. 0, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and put our asymptote there, put our asymptote there. Our middle is right over here. Okay, and so instead of going left up, right down, we'll go right up, left down, and then right here we'll go up 1. Here we'll go down 1, and we're going to graph it like so. Okay. All right, so there you have it. You might want to have to rewatch this again several times to just kind of get that in your mind. But again, the most important part for tangents and cotangents is your endpoints, your end asymptotes. For cotangent is 0 to pi, and just put whatever's in there right in the middle. And for tangent is those two. And then for cosine and sine, it's essentially the same thing. You just have to know all of the components A, B, C, D. 2 pi over b will be your period. Negative c over b will be your starting phase shift. Now, some teachers just tell their students to put c over b, but they're reminded that whatever number you get, do the very opposite. So if you start off with a negative, whatever you get, that's where you're actually going to start. I hope that makes sense. Okay. All right. There you go.